My mother-in-law tried to sue me for my unborn baby at my own baby shower. I should have known Linda would find a way to ruin the one day that was supposed to be about celebrating my baby. Looking back now, 6 months later with my beautiful daughter sleeping peacefully in her crib, I can see all the warning signs I missed. But at 7 months pregnant, exhausted from insomnia and swollen ankles, I was just trying to make it through each day without my mother-in-law's constant criticism echoing in my head. Let me back up and explain how we got to the point where a woman would announce her intention to sue for custody of an unborn child in front of 40 people at a baby shower. I met my husband David 3 years ago at a marketing conference in Denver. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in my career as a graphic designer. We moved in together after 8 months, got engaged after 18 months, and married in a small ceremony 2 years later. Everything felt perfect, except for one glaring problem: Linda Martinez, his mother. From our first meeting, Linda made it clear I wasn't good enough for her precious son. During our initial dinner at her house, she spent the entire evening pointing out how David's ex-girlfriend Sarah was studying to be a doctor, while I was just in advertising. When I corrected her that I was actually a freelance graphic designer with my own client base, she waved her hand dismissively and said, "Same difference, dear." The comments never stopped. When David and I got engaged, Linda told everyone at the engagement party that she hoped I wouldn't let myself go after the wedding like so many women do. When we bought our house, she criticized everything from the neighborhood to the paint colors, insisting we should have consulted her first since she has experience with real estate. She didn't. She'd lived in the same house for 30 years. But the real nightmare began when I got pregnant. David and I had been trying for about 6 months when those 2 pink lines appeared on the test. We were over the moon, both of us crying happy tears in our bathroom at 6 in the morning. David immediately wanted to call his mother to share the news, but I asked if we could wait until we got through the first trimester. I'd read about miscarriage rates and wanted to be cautious. "My mom's going to be so excited," David said, practically bouncing with joy. "She's been asking about grandkids since our wedding day." That should have been my first red flag. Linda hadn't been asking about grandkids in general. She'd been asking about my ability to provide them, often with thinly veiled comments about my age, 28, and my stressful lifestyle. When we finally shared the news at 12 weeks, Linda's reaction wasn't quite what David expected. "Oh," she said, sitting back in her chair at the restaurant. "That was quick." "What do you mean, Mom?" David asked, his smile faltering slightly. "Nothing, sweetheart. I just thought you might wait a bit longer, make sure you're financially stable, that Emma's ready for the responsibility." I felt my cheeks burn. David and I both had good jobs, we just bought a house, and we were both eager to start a family. But Linda had this way of making everything sound like a mistake or poor planning. "We're very ready," I said, placing my hand on my still flat stomach. "We've been planning this." Linda's eyes narrowed slightly. "Planning? You've been married less than a year." The dinner went downhill from there, with Linda questioning everything from our childcare plans to whether we'd considered the impact on David's career. By the time we left, I was fighting back tears and David was making excuses for his mother's behavior. "She's just surprised," he said as we drove home. "She'll come around when she processes the news." But Linda didn't come around. Instead, her behavior got worse. She started showing up unannounced at our house, always when David wasn't home, claiming she wanted to help with baby preparations. Her version of help involved criticizing our choice of nursery furniture, questioning my prenatal vitamin routine, and making passive-aggressive comments about my work schedule. "Are you really planning to keep working full-time?" she asked during one of these visits, running her finger along our coffee table as if checking for dust. David was always such a hands-on child, he'll need a mother who's present. "I'll be working from home mostly," I explained for the 3rd time. "My clients are flexible, and David and I have already discussed sharing parenting duties." Linda laughed, actually laughed. "Oh honey, men say a lot of things before the baby comes. But when push comes to shove, children need their mothers. It's biology." These conversations always left me feeling drained and defensive. I started timing my grocery runs and errands to avoid Linda's surprise visits. When I mentioned this to David, he suggested I was being oversensitive due to pregnancy hormones. "My mom's just old-fashioned," he said. "She means well." But Linda's behavior escalated beyond old-fashioned concern. She started commenting on my social media posts with unsolicited advice and barely concealed criticism. When I posted a picture of David and me at a friend's birthday party at 5 months pregnant, Linda commented, "Hope you're being careful about alcohol exposure. Even secondhand smoke can be dangerous." The picture clearly showed me holding a glass of water, but her comment made it sound like I was being reckless. When I shared a photo of the nursery we've been working on, Linda wrote, "Very modern, I hope it's safe for the baby." David's nursery was much more traditional. She followed up with a private message suggesting I research the paint brands we'd used and their potential toxicity levels. I started screenshotting these interactions, partly because they were so absurd I wanted to show David, and partly because something felt off about the way Linda was documenting my every move with her pointed comments. The breaking point came when Linda insisted on throwing me a baby shower. "I want to do something special for my future grandchild," she announced during a family dinner at 6 months pregnant. A grandmother's shower, to welcome the baby into our family. I already had a shower planned with my sister Rachel and my best friend Chloe for the following month. It was going to be small, intimate, just close friends and family in my sister's backyard. "That's so thoughtful," David said before I could respond. "Mom, that's really generous of you." Linda beamed at her son. "I was thinking we could do it at the country club, make it a real event. I've already spoken to the event coordinator." My stomach dropped. Linda's country club was formal, stuffy, and expensive. She'd clearly already made plans without consulting me. "Actually," I said carefully, "Rachel and Chloe are already planning something. Maybe we could combine efforts?" Linda's expression hardened. "Oh, I'm sure your sister means well, but this is my first grandchild. I think the paternal grandmother should take the lead on these things." The way she said first grandchild made it clear this wasn't about celebrating the baby, it was about establishing territory. David, oblivious to the undercurrents, jumped in enthusiastically. "Why don't we do both? Emma can have her casual thing with her friends, and Mom can do something nice for our family and family friends." I wanted to argue, but I was exhausted and Linda was already pulling out her phone to show us pictures of the country club's event space. Before I knew it, I'd agreed to a formal baby shower for 60 people, most of whom I barely knew. "I'll handle all the planning," Linda said sweetly. "You just focus on staying healthy." Over the next 3 weeks, Linda threw herself into shower planning with frightening intensity. She called me daily with updates, none of which involved my input. The theme would be classic elegance, the colors would be soft yellow and white since we weren't finding out the gender, and the menu would be sophisticated brunch fare. When I suggested including some of my friends in the guest list, Linda sighed heavily. "Emma, this is already getting quite large. I think it's better to keep it to family and family friends. Your people can come to the other shower." My people. Like I was from a different species. The guest list Linda created was a who's who of David's extended family, her country club friends, and neighbors I'd met maybe twice. She'd invited my parents and Rachel, almost as an afterthought, but the shower was clearly her show. "Are you okay with all this?" Rachel asked me over coffee 2 weeks before the event. "You seem stressed about something that's supposed to celebrate you." I sighed, rubbing my belly where the baby was currently using my ribs as a punching bag. Linda just has very specific ideas about how things should be done. I don't want to cause problems. Rachel, who's 3 years older than me and has never been afraid to speak her mind, frowned. "Emma, you're the one having the baby. You should get to decide how you want to celebrate." "I know, but David's so excited about his mom being involved. She's been pretty critical throughout the pregnancy, and this seems to make her happy. Maybe if I go along with this, she'll ease up after the baby comes." Rachel looked skeptical but didn't push. She did, however, make a comment that stuck with me. "Just remember, the way people treat you during pregnancy often gets worse after the baby arrives, not better. Boundaries don't magically appear because you've given birth." 3 days before the shower, Linda called with a last-minute request. "I hope you don't mind, but I've invited David's pediatrician to the shower. Dr. Peterson has been our family doctor for 25 years, and I thought it would be nice for him to meet you before the baby arrives." This struck me as odd. We'd already chosen our own pediatrician, Dr. Chen, who came highly recommended and was covered by our insurance. I'd had multiple appointments with her already and felt comfortable with our choice. That's thoughtful, I said slowly, but we've already selected a pediatrician. Oh, I know David mentioned that, but Dr. Peterson is so experienced. I just thought it couldn't hurt to have options. There was something in Linda's tone that made me uneasy, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I decided to let it go. One more person at a 60-person shower wouldn't matter. The morning of the shower, I woke up feeling anxious in a way that went beyond normal pregnancy nerves. My back ached, my feet were swollen, and I had the heavy feeling that comes with being 7 months pregnant in August heat. David was being unusually attentive, bringing me breakfast in bed and helping me get ready. "You look beautiful," he said as I struggled to zip up the maternity dress Linda had suggested I wear. It was pale yellow, very conservative, and not at all my style, but Linda had made it clear that the dress code was elegant and appropriate. "I feel like a walking banana," I muttered, trying to get comfortable in shoes that had fit perfectly 2 weeks ago. David laughed and rubbed my shoulders. "My mom put a lot of work into this. I think it's really going to be special." Something in his voice made me look at him more closely. He seemed nervous, excited in a way that felt different from normal anticipation. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Of course," he said quickly. "I'm just excited for everyone to celebrate you and the baby." We arrived at the country club to find Linda had outdone herself. The private dining room was decorated with elaborate floral arrangements, gold-rimmed china, and enough yellow ribbon to stock a craft store. About 40 people were already there, most of whom I recognized but couldn't name. Linda swooped in immediately, wearing a dress that clearly cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Emma, darling, you look lovely. Come, let me introduce you to some people." The next hour passed in a blur of small talk with Linda's friends, opening gifts I hadn't registered for but was expected to gush over, and eating tiny sandwiches that did nothing for my pregnancy appetite. Rachel stayed close by my side, making quiet jokes to keep my spirits up. "Is it just me, or does this feel more like Linda's party than yours?" she whispered while Linda directed the photographer to take proper family photos. "It definitely feels that way," I agreed, watching Linda pose with gifts as if she were the expectant mother. Things took a weird turn when Linda insisted on a gift-opening ceremony with me seated in the center of the room while everyone watched. This wasn't unusual for baby showers, but Linda had appointed herself as my assistant, reading cards aloud and holding up each gift for the crowd's approval. "Oh, this is lovely," Linda announced, pulling a baby blanket from a gift bag. "Though I do hope everyone remembered to wash new items before giving them to pregnant mothers. You can never be too careful about chemicals and allergens." She said this while looking directly at me, as if I were somehow failing to be appropriately cautious about gift handling. The comments continued with each present. When someone gave us a baby monitor, Linda mentioned that constant surveillance might create anxiety for new parents. When we opened a set of organic baby food makers, she worried aloud about the pressure on new mothers to make everything from scratch. Every comment was phrased as general concern, but delivered in a way that felt like criticism of my future parenting choices. About halfway through the gift opening, Dr. Peterson arrived. He was an older man, probably in his 70s, with the kind of authoritative presence that made everyone pay attention when he spoke. Linda lit up when she saw him. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Dr. Peterson, our family pediatrician. Doctor, this is Emma, David's wife." Dr. Peterson shook my hand and smiled warmly. "Congratulations, my dear. Linda's told me so much about you." Something cold settled in my stomach. What exactly had Linda told him? Dr. Peterson delivered David, Linda announced to the room. "He's been taking care of our family for decades. I thought it would be wonderful for him to meet Emma and discuss his availability for the baby." I forced a smile. "That's very kind, but we've already chosen a pediatrician." Of course," Dr. Peterson said diplomatically. "But it never hurts to have options, especially for first-time parents." Linda nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly my thinking. First-time mothers can feel so overwhelmed, it's important to have experienced guidance." The conversation continued around me, with Linda and Dr. Peterson discussing the challenges of modern parenting while I sat there feeling like an observer at my own shower. Rachel was frowning beside me, and I could see my parents exchanging concerned glances across the room. Finally, we finished opening gifts and Linda called for everyone's attention. Before we have cake, I wanted to say a few words about this special day. She moved to stand in front of the room, and I noticed David had positioned himself near the door, which struck me as odd. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my future grandchild," Linda began. "As many of you know, becoming a grandmother has been a dream of mine for years." The speech started normally enough, with Linda talking about her excitement and gratitude. But then her tone shifted. "Of course, welcoming a new baby into the family is a big responsibility. Children need stability, consistency, and experienced guidance. That's why I'm so grateful to have Dr. Peterson here today." She gestured to the pediatrician, who smiled and nodded. "Dr. Peterson and I have been discussing the importance of having strong support systems for new families, especially when parents might be inexperienced or unprepared for the challenges ahead." My heart started pounding. Where was this going? That's why I've made the decision to take a more active role in ensuring my grandchild receives the best possible care and guidance from day one. Linda paused dramatically, and the room went quiet. "I've consulted with my attorney, and will be filing for grandparents' rights to ensure I can provide the support and oversight this baby will need." The words hit me like a physical blow. Grandparents' rights. Oversight. In front of 40 people, Linda was announcing her intention to legally force her way into our lives and my child's upbringing. The room was dead silent. I could feel everyone staring at me, waiting for my reaction. My face was burning with humiliation and shock. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say, my voice barely audible. Linda's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Emma, honey, I know this might come as a surprise, but I've been watching your social media posts, your behavior throughout this pregnancy, and I'm concerned about your readiness for motherhood." She was doing this. She was actually doing this in front of all these people. "You've been posting pictures of yourself at parties, you've been working excessive hours, and frankly, some of your lifestyle choices concern me. Dr. Peterson agrees that first-time mothers often benefit from experienced oversight." I looked around the room desperately. Some people looked uncomfortable, others curious, a few seemed to be nodding along with Linda's concerns. My parents looked horrified, and Rachel had gone completely white. But the most crushing moment was when I looked at David. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't defending me. He was standing by the door with an expression I'd never seen before, resigned and guilty. He knew. "David," I said, my voice shaking. "Did you know about this?" The room held its breath. David looked at his mother, then at me, then at the floor. "Emma, maybe we should discuss this privately." "No," I said, standing up with difficulty, my pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "Your mother just announced her intention to sue me for custody of my unborn child in front of 40 people. I think privacy went out the window about 5 minutes ago." Linda stepped forward, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. "Emma, please don't get upset. Stress isn't good for the baby. This is exactly the kind of overreaction I'm concerned about." Overreaction? I was shaking now, from anger and shock and the humiliation of being ambushed like this. "You just told a room full of people that you don't think I'm fit to be a mother." "I never said unfit," Linda said smoothly. "I said inexperienced and in need of guidance. There's a difference." Rachel stood up beside me, her face flushed with anger. "There's no difference, and you know it. This is harassment, plain and simple." Linda turned her attention to my sister. "And you must be Rachel. I understand you're a lawyer?" "I am," Rachel said coldly. "Then you'll understand that grandparents have rights too, especially when there are concerns about the child's welfare." "What concerns?" Rachel demanded. "Emma is a healthy, employed, married adult who's been preparing for this baby for months. What possible grounds could you have for legal action?" Linda smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "Well, there's Emma's history of mental health issues, for starters." The room went dead silent again. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. 5 years ago, after my father had a heart attack, I'd gone through a brief period of depression and anxiety. I'd seen a therapist for a few months and took medication for about 6 months until I felt stable again. It was a private, personal scribble that I'd worked through with professional help. I told David about it early in our relationship because I believed in honesty. I'd never imagined he would share that information with his mother, let alone that she would weaponize it against me. That's private medical information, Rachel said, her voice deadly calm. And completely irrelevant to Emma's ability to parent. Is it? Linda asked. Because according to my research, postpartum depression is much more likely in women who have a history of mental health struggles. I think it's responsible to have safeguards in place. She was twisting everything, making my past therapy sound like evidence of instability rather than proof that I was responsible enough to seek help when I needed it. I looked at David again, desperate for him to say something, to defend me, to tell his mother she was out of line. Instead, he said quietly, "Emma, my mom just wants what's best for the baby." Something broke inside me. My husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner and protector, was siding with his mother's attempt to take legal action against me. What's best for the baby, I repeated slowly, is for the baby to have parents who love and support each other, not a grandmother who thinks she knows better than the baby's actual mother. Emma, Linda said in that infuriating, patronizing tone, "I understand you're emotional right now, but—" "Stop," Rachel interrupted, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Just stop talking." My sister walked to her purse and pulled out a manila folder. I watched in confusion as she opened it and removed several sheets of paper. "Linda Martinez," Rachel said formally, "you are hereby served with a cease and desist order requiring you to stop harassing my sister and threatening legal action without grounds." She handed the papers to Linda, who looked stunned. "Rachel," I whispered, "how did you?" "I've been documenting Linda's behavior for weeks," Rachel said without taking her eyes off my mother-in-law. "Emma showed me the social media comments, told me about the surprise visits, the constant criticism. I started keeping records when I realized this was escalating into harassment." She turned to address the room, her voice clear and professional. "For everyone's information, threatening to pursue grandparents' rights without legal standing constitutes harassment under state law. Specifically, Section 12-47 of the Family Harassment Statute, which makes it a misdemeanor to threaten legal action for the purpose of intimidating or controlling expectant parents." Linda had gone pale. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," Rachel continued. "Furthermore, sharing private medical information without consent, which you just did in front of 40 witnesses, violates both HIPAA regulations and state privacy laws." She pulled out another sheet of paper. "This is a motion for a restraining order, which I'll be filing first thing Monday morning if you don't cease all contact with my sister immediately." The room was completely silent except for the sound of Linda breathing heavily. "You can't do this," Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I absolutely can," Rachel replied. "I specialize in family law, and I've been practicing for 8 years. I know exactly what I can do." David finally found his voice. "Rachel, I think you're overreacting. My mom's just concerned." "Your mom," Rachel said, turning to face my husband, "just publicly humiliated your pregnant wife and threatened to sue her for custody of your child. If you think that's concern, you might want to examine your priorities." She turned back to Linda. "You have 2 choices. You can accept the cease and desist order, stay away from Emma, and abandon whatever legal action you think you're going to pursue. Or you can continue this behavior and face criminal harassment charges, a restraining order, and a very public legal battle that will expose exactly what you've been doing to everyone in your social circle." Linda looked around the room, perhaps hoping for support, but everyone was staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. "I was only trying to help," she said weakly. "No," I said, finding my voice at last. "You were trying to control me. You've been trying to control me since the day I met you, and when I didn't respond the way you wanted, you decided to take legal action to force your way into my life." I looked at David, who was still standing by the door like he was planning to escape. "And you," I continued, my voice getting stronger, "you let her. You fed her information about my private medical history, you supported her decision to threaten me, and you helped her plan this ambush." David started to protest, but I held up my hand. "We're done here," I said. "Rachel, can you drive me home?" "Of course," she said immediately. I turned to address the room one more time. "Thank you all for coming to what was supposed to be a celebration. I'm sorry you had to witness this, but I want you all to understand what really happened here today. A woman used my baby shower as a platform to publicly threaten and humiliate me with the support of my own husband. I grabbed my purse and started toward the door, Rachel beside me. "Emma, wait," David called out. I turned around one last time. "David, when you're ready to be a husband instead of your mother's son, you know where to find me." Until then, all communication goes through my sister. We left Linda standing in her perfectly decorated room, surrounded by unopened gifts and stunned guests. The ride home was quiet except for my crying. Rachel didn't try to make conversation, just handed me tissues and drove carefully. "How long have you been preparing for this?" I finally asked. "About 3 weeks," she admitted. After our coffee date, I started researching grandparents' rights laws and harassment statutes. Something about the way you described Linda's behavior reminded me of a case I worked on last year. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rachel glanced at me. "Because I hoped I was wrong. I hoped she was just a difficult mother-in-law, not someone who would actually follow through on legal threats. But when you mentioned she'd invited a pediatrician to meet you, I got suspicious." "What do you mean?" "Think about it, Emma. She invites a doctor she's known for decades to your shower, makes a big show of introducing him as someone who could provide guidance for first-time parents, then announces legal action with him right there as a witness. She was building a case, documenting concerns with a medical professional present to back up her claims. The manipulation was even worse than I'd realized." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you focus on your health and your baby," Rachel said firmly. "Linda will back down, trust me. She doesn't want this to become a public legal battle, especially not when she has no grounds to stand on. And David, well, David has some serious thinking to do about where his loyalties lie." We pulled into my driveway, and I realized I had no idea if David would come home or go to his mother's house. "Do you want me to stay tonight?" Rachel offered. "Yes," I said immediately. "I don't want to be alone right now." That night, David didn't come home. He sent a text saying he was staying at his mother's house to give me space to calm down. The message made me angrier than anything else that had happened, as if I were the one who had behaved unreasonably. Rachel helped me out of the yellow dress I now hated and made me tea while I tried to process what had happened. "I feel so stupid," I said, sitting in my kitchen still wearing maternity shapewear because I was too tired to change. All the signs were there, and I just kept making excuses. "You weren't stupid," Rachel said firmly. "You were trying to keep the peace for your husband's sake. That's what people in healthy relationships do. They compromise and try to get along with their partner's family. But David isn't in a healthy relationship with his mother, I realized. He's still acting like her child instead of my husband." Rachel nodded. "And that's something he's going to have to figure out before this baby arrives." Over the next few days, I heard nothing from David directly. Linda, true to Rachel's prediction, did not pursue legal action. In fact, according to David's cousin who called to check on me, Linda was telling people that the whole thing had been a misunderstanding and that I had overreacted due to pregnancy hormones. David finally came home 4 days later, while I was working in the nursery. "Emma," he said from the doorway, "we need to talk." I looked up from the crib I was assembling, a task that would have been much easier with his help. "Do we?" I asked. "Because it seems like you've already made your position pretty clear." He came into the room and sat on the glider chair we picked out together months ago. "I know you're angry," he began. "David, I'm not angry. Angry doesn't even begin to cover what I'm feeling right now." I set down the screwdriver and faced him. "I'm heartbroken that my husband chose his mother over me. I'm terrified that I'm about to have a baby with someone who doesn't have my back. And I'm disgusted that you shared my private medical information with someone who used it to threaten me." David looked uncomfortable. "Emma, you're being dramatic. My mom wasn't really going to sue you. Then why did she say she was? Why did she hire a lawyer? Why did she invite a doctor to witness her concerns about my fitness as a mother? She was trying to make a point about being included in the baby's life." I stared at him. "David, do you hear yourself? You're making excuses for someone who publicly humiliated me and threatened legal action. At my own baby shower. Look, I know my mom can be intense, but she loves this family. She loves you, in her own way. She doesn't love me, David. She sees me as competition for your attention and as an obstacle to her control over your life. And instead of setting boundaries with her, you've been feeding her ammunition to use against me. David was quiet for a long moment. What do you want from me, Emma? I want you to be my husband. I want you to put our family first. I want you to stop letting your mother interfere in our marriage and our parenting decisions. And if I can't do that, the question hung in the air between us. I realized he was asking me to choose between accepting his mother's behavior or ending our marriage. Then I guess you've already made your choice, I said quietly. David left again that night. This time, he took some clothes with him. The next 2 months passed in a blur of lawyer consultations, difficult conversations, and preparing to possibly be a single mother. Rachel helped me research my options and document everything that had happened. David and I tried counseling, but he spent most of our sessions defending his mother's actions and insisting I was being unreasonable. Linda, meanwhile, had shifted tactics entirely. She was now telling everyone who would listen that I was keeping her son away from his family and refusing to let her see her grandchild. She'd completely rewritten the narrative to make herself the victim. Our daughter, Sophia, was born on a Tuesday morning in October. David was there for the birth, and for a few hours, holding our perfect little girl, it felt like maybe we could work things out. But Linda arrived at the hospital within 2 hours of Sophia's birth, despite the fact that I'd specifically asked for no visitors the first day. I couldn't stay away, she announced, pushing past David into my recovery room. I need to meet my granddaughter. She immediately started trying to take the baby from my arms, criticizing the way I was holding her, and questioning the nurses about my breastfeeding attempts. Are you sure she's latching correctly? Linda asked loudly. She seems fussy. Maybe we should get a lactation consultant. It was the last straw. Get out, I said, clutching Sophia closer. Emma, don't be ridiculous, Linda said. I'm just trying to help. Rachel, I called to my sister, who was in the hallway. Can you please ask security to remove Linda Martinez from my room? David looked shocked. Emma, she just wants to see the baby. David, if you don't ask your mother to leave right now, I'm calling security myself. Linda left, but not before making a scene in the hallway about being denied access to her grandchild. That night, David and I had our final conversation as a married couple. I can't do this anymore, I told him while Sophia slept in her bassinet beside my hospital bed. I can't be married to someone who won't protect me and our daughter from harassment. Emma, please. We can work this out. No, David. We can't. Because working this out would require you to set boundaries with your mother, and you've made it clear that's never going to happen. 6 months later, our divorce was final. David has visitation rights, which he exercises regularly, though always under Linda's supervision. He never did learn to put his wife and daughter first. Linda occasionally tries to contact me through mutual acquaintances, usually with offers to help with Sophia or complaints about being cut out of her granddaughter's life. Each time, Rachel sends a polite but firm reminder about the terms of our restraining order. I built a good life for Sophia and me. I work from home, have a strong support system, and most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts about people's behavior instead of making excuses for them. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Rachel hadn't been prepared that day at the shower. Would Linda have actually followed through on her legal threats? Would David have eventually chosen his family over his mother? But mostly, I'm grateful that the confrontation happened when it did, as humiliating as it was. It forced me to see the truth about my marriage and gave me the clarity I needed to protect my daughter and myself. Sophia is 8 months old now, happy and healthy and surrounded by people who love her without conditions or manipulation. She'll grow up knowing her father, but she'll also grow up in a home where her mother's voice matters and her boundaries are respected. Linda got exactly what she deserved in the end, not the compliant daughter-in-law she could control, but a daughter-in-law who refused to be intimidated. And while I didn't get the family I thought I was marrying into, I got something better, the knowledge that I'm strong enough to stand up for myself and my child when it matters most. The yellow dress from the shower is still hanging in my closet. I keep meaning to donate it, but something stops me every time. Maybe it's a reminder of the day I learned who I really was, or maybe it's just a really ugly dress that I'll eventually get rid of when I'm ready to completely close that chapter of my life. Either way, Sophia and I are exactly where we need to be.